Prop 65 is something that still is a big pain in everybody's arse. Talking about patent trolls, it's a great segue right into to this one. So for anyone not aware, either Paul or Joy, which do you want to explain exactly what this Prop 65 is? Go ahead, Paul.
Sure, I'll do it. Prop 65 is a warning. It's a law about giving notice to people, and it's a California law. So this is only a law in the state of California. What we're discussing, you're not required to necessarily do in other states. And what it is there's this big list of chemicals that California has determined cause cancer. And these chemicals, whether it's phthalates, whether it's lead, they're in everything. So if you buy supplements, most likely the supplements came from the ground. That ground had lead in it. That lead probably at some level mixed in with your supplement contents. Therefore, you have to make a Proposition 65 warning about that. If you sell a product with like a vinyl, like this pen with a vinyl handle, right? If the vinyl is made with a certain phthalate, you have to put a Prop 65 warning. There's a ton of chemicals that have this, and it's become kind of a joke in California. So in California, you'll see this like orange, the yellow triangle with an exclamation point to say warning, Prop 65, cancer or reproductive harm, and you'll see it everywhere. You'll see it at hotels. You'll see it when you rent a car. Like I rented a car in Utah last year with California plates, and there was a Prop 65 warning on the dashboard. So this is on a lot of products. I guarantee you, if you go through your house right now, or not right now, but at some point and look at products that are in their original packaging, you might actually find this little yellow triangle thing, and it says, warning, CA Prop 65. So that warning, unfortunately, is a real problem, because the way this law is designed is if you don't put the warning on your product, if you don't give the consumer that warning the way you're supposed to in compliance with California law, you could be fined $2,500 a day. Now, to make things worse, they set up a legal system that is pure bounty hunter logic. So any lawyer, pretty much, I don't know if you have to be a California lawyer to do, I assume you would have to be, but theoretically, any lawyer can go in, find your product, see that you're not in compliance with the law, file what's called a 60-day letter, 60-day notice with the state of California, and basically initiate a lawsuit against you to pay the fine. It's actually called a private attorney general action. So what the attorney general has said is like, we're going to let the private citizenry act as the attorney general and enforce this Prop 65 law. And by doing so, they'll keep a small percentage of the fees will go to the citizen who reported the incident, and they will also be allowed to cover their legal fees. And that's the key thing, legal fees. So all of a sudden, you have this body of law that you can enforce, and if you get caught in it, not only do you have to pay the fine, you have to pay the lawyer's legal fees. So obviously, these bounty hunter lawyers are foaming to just bring these cases, and they do constantly go after sellers for these cases for not having the proper warning on the product. And
I want to say one more thing about this. There are conditions under which you do not have to put this on your label based on the size of your business.
Yes.
And the biggest thing here is that these patent troll attorneys are arguing, because how many employees? What's the limit? Do you know?
So it's less than 10 employees. So really
less than 10 employees based on the number of employees.
Yeah.
Now, do contractors count?
Under the California ABC law, they would actually probably try to do that. I've seen
They would try to say
they would try to make that argument that they'll look at your. The thing is, if your VAs are overseas, they may not notice them, but you're supposed to disclose like how many contractors you have, and they'll ask that question.
Right. Now, what we do with our company, which is interesting, is that we have a third-party company that we outsource. So, like here's the thing,
staffing,
right? So, anyone here that's doing $3-5 million in sales, you can do that with under 10 employees easily, especially if you're outsourcing your PPC, for example, right? Because like if you have less than 100 SKUs and you have like an agency handling something, that agent, if that agency has 400 employees, it doesn't matter. That's one contractor. It's not even an employee. So here's it all depends on the way you structure it. But what they're arguing is that you are listing on Amazon, and Amazon has way more than 10 employees.
Correct.
Are they
And
still
that's
using that argument?
absolutely. Well, they're not just arguing it. What they're doing is they're filing the 60-day notice against the seller and Amazon as the retailer. So the seller is almost like the wholesaler. Amazon's kind of perceived as the retailer. Um, and so what they're doing is they're basically saying they're bringing the case against Amazon. So you can go back to that person and say, yeah, I have less than 10 employees. And they'll be like, great, we're still going to bring our case against Amazon. Now, here's where it gets weird because Amazon as a retailer has special rights that wholesalers and upstream sellers like us, the sellers, don't have, which is this sort of like, I forget, it was like, was it 2 business days? There's a small window of time after Amazon receives notice as a retailer where they can put the warning up and be immune from further prosecution. But for some reason, Amazon doesn't do that. They used to, but then sometimes they don't. So what can happen is rather than notifying the seller and Amazon that there's been a violation, the lawyers will just notify Amazon by themselves about the seller's product. And sometimes the seller won't even know that they're subject to a Prop 65 investigation for like a year or two until they're in court. And then Amazon will send Amazon's lawyers will send that seller a letter saying, we're in the middle of this case involving Prop 65 with this product that you sold. Please reach out to this law firm and settle the case. And so what Amazon basically did was with Prop 65 and the Prop 65 legal community is come up with this way of like taking their liability and dividing it up into each individual seller's liability and making each individual seller independently settle the case. Even though the seller is less than 10 employees, they're really settling Amazon's case. And it's just a mess, but it's what they've been doing. So people have been getting sucked into these Prop 65 cases, even though they don't have 10 employees, because the person, the party that they're going after is Amazon, and then your obligation to indemnify Amazon pursuant to the indemnity provisions of the Amazon Business Solutions Agreement require you to then pay for that. So it's a bit of an ugly mess when that happens. And there's certainly things that people can do, especially as private label sellers, to help avoid those cases. But I do want to say one other thing. A typical Prop 65 settlement. Let's say you settle a case for, I know sometimes you settle for $3,000, $4,000, $5,000, sometimes $20,000. It has to do with how much you sold, how aggressive the lawyer is being, things like that. But I will say this, and all these settlements are public record. You can read all these. You go to oag.ca.gov, put in your product. Like if you put in, USB hub, you'll probably find a bunch of Prop 65 CCA notices about USB hubs. Like any product, you'll probably find what you're looking for. But what's interesting, and just so you understand how lucrative this is, let's say a Prop 65 settlement is $15,000. Of that $15,000, I would say, I don't know, maybe $1,000 goes to the state of California. Maybe another $500 to the person who who theoretically hired the lawyers to prosecute this Prop 65 case, right? So that's what, $1,500, and that leaves us with $13,500 in legal fees, just paying the lawyers' fees. So like, it really isn't a win for California when they prosecute these cases. Like it's like the they get a few bucks out of it, but these lawyers are just making bank on these cases.
Yeah, and so what do you recommend to sellers? I mean, just immediately check if this is relevant, put it on your listing, put it on your packaging, or like what is it? How do we get into compliance to make sure that this doesn't happen to us?
So I mean, technically you're not supposed to guess. You're not supposed to just put, a lot of people want to just put the warning up willy-nilly. They don't care. It's like, I'll just put the warning up, safe harbor. Couple things. One is, I've been told that California has told me that they consider that to be false advertising. I'd like to see that case go forward. Like you promised me toxic lead and you didn't give it to me. I'm not sure I buy that. But there is a desire to be accurate with these reporting. So they want people to test their products, which you can go to Eurofins, SGS. They all have Prop 65 tests. So you can see if there's any in your products that might trigger a Prop 65 warning. If it does, or if you just want to throw it up there anyway because you don't want to deal with it, because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if you're right or wrong. If you get accused of this, you're going to pay. You're not going to fight it in court. It's just it's very it's nearly impossible to fight these court cases in court as a small seller. It's especially when Amazon's the one telling you we're not going to fight this. We just want you to settle it on our behalf. But what happens is that so what you can do is once you've determined you want to put a Prop 65 warning up on Amazon, the way to do it is don't put it in the bullets, don't put it in your content. There's actually at the back end of Amazon, there is an actual Prop 65 compliance section. And what you do is you put in the chemical that your product, has. So it could be a vinyl, it could be some phthalate
How good
products.
is ChatGPT at this? So if I put in what Prop 65 warning would be relevant for a vinyl product or product with vinyl. And let me see what it says. Phthalates, lead,
or it's vinyl. This is one. It's DEHP is the one I'm thinking of. DEHP, which is basically a fancy word for diethyl hexyl phthalate.
Okay, so it is a phthalate. It's a type of phthalate. Okay.
Yeah. So the other thing you can do is you can go to the website oig.ca.gov and literally just put in the search bar.
All right, let's let me see.
And you'll see.
Let's type that. Let's type that in the chat and then put it on the screen if we can. Marlene.
Let's see. Because this is what most people do. We just go to this website and we just look to see if we find our products, and that gives you a sense of what chemicals you may be looking for. So once you figure that out, then you go into the Amazon back end and you go to the Prop 65 questionnaire and it'll say, put in your chemical, and it'll say, what type of warning do you want to do? Do you want to do cancer, reproductive harm, both? Something like that, right? You usually are just put both. What that will do is it'll generate a Prop 65 warning system in Amazon. And the way you won't know it's there unless you put your delivery zip code as a California zip code. So if you change the delivery zip code on a listing to 90210, you'll see if the product has a warning in place, you'll see it pop up, right? It'll show up. It should show up on the listing just below the product description. And then it'll show up again as you check out, like through the different phases of checkout, it'll show up in the shopping cart so that you see the warning each time as you go through. Now, under California law, you're supposed to, under the safe harbor, also print the warning on your packaging. My concern doing that is that it could scare a lot of people, because when you put that warning on packaging, that packaging is not just going to California people. That's going to people in Wisconsin, Iowa, wherever. Those people may not know
that's going to scare people. Yeah.
It's going to scare people. So, you have to take risk into account, and I'm not giving you any advice here. People can follow whatever. But I think, the way these bounty hunters tend to operate is they look for products that don't have the digital warning on Amazon. So they're looking for products that when you put in the California zip code and you go to buy it, there's no warning. Okay? Because that's a clear-cut case. If the product is, in fact, containing a Prop 65 chemical and there's a warning, that's a clear-cut case. They're not going to want to test buy products that have the digital warning up in the hopes that maybe it doesn't have the physical warning, because even that's not a clear case. Like, you still have a case to argue that Amazon warning is sufficient, right? It just hasn't been adjudicated yet whether that's the case. But I've never really seen a Prop 65 lawyer take that issue to task, that, hey, you didn't have the physical warning, you have the digital warning. What they will do is, if you get caught up in it, they'll tell you need to put the physical warning on the package. If you get caught up as part of settling the case. So it's entirely a risk tolerance question, but I think, and there's an argument to be made that just doing the Amazon version of the warning should be sufficient for most people who are primarily selling on Amazon. But it's up to you. It's a risk question that you have to take into account.
Dude, this is super helpful. I think that Prop 65 is one of these scary areas for us to try to navigate and figure out. And that website is going to be super helpful for people to know where to go.
Yeah, it's a great website. You just put your products in and you'll find most likely somebody's already filed a case against your product. And you can see how it's settled. You can see all that stuff is on the websites that you can see.